We often think that success is all about having the right answers. But what if that's all wrong? What if the real secret, the actual game changer, isn't in the answers we have, but in the questions we're brave enough to ask? That's what we're digging into today, how asking smarter questions can totally transform the way we work, lead, and innovate.
So here's what we've got on tap. First up, we'll talk about something called the question revolution and why it's shaking up modern leadership. Then we'll get into the real meat of it, a toolkit with 5 distinct question domains to help you see the full picture. And finally, we'll figure out how you can find your own balance and use this stuff in the real world.
Okay, so something really big is happening in the world of leadership. The old model, the one where the boss is supposed to be a genius who has all the solutions, yeah, that's pretty much dead. The world today is just too complex, it's moving way too fast for any one person to have all the answers.
And look, this isn't just some business school theory. The best leaders out there are already living this. Take Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA. He said he can go an entire day just asking questions. I mean, think about that. He's not just barking orders. He's digging, he's exploring, he's sparking new ideas by tapping into the minds of his team.
This slide really nails the shift. We're moving away from that genius at the top idea. The new reality is that the genius is spread all throughout the team. A leader's job isn't to be the genius, it's to unlock that collective intelligence. And the key to doing that, it's all about asking smart, strategic questions.
So the big question is, how do you actually do that? How do you make sure you're asking the questions that really move the needle? Well, that's where these 5 question domains come into play. Think of it as a complete toolkit for making sure you see the whole picture and don't get blindsided. And this right here perfectly sums up why this is so important. A wrong answer? Hey, you can usually fix that. But an unasked question? Well, that creates a blind spot, and that's where huge risks can hide and amazing opportunities just wither away. These 5 domains are basically your insurance policy against those kinds of oversight.
All right, let's jump into our first domain, investigative questions. This is all about getting grounded in reality. It's about hitting pause and asking, okay, what do we actually know to be true here?
So, with investigative questions, you're basically putting on your detective hat. You're digging past the surface level stuff, challenging every assumption, and making sure everyone agrees on the basic facts. The biggest trap people fall into here is treating assumptions like they're solid facts. These questions stop that from happening.
And if you want a perfect, and very expensive, example of what happens when these questions don't get asked, look no further than this story. Back in 2014, the French National Railway, SNCF, spent an incredible 15 billion euros on new trains. But they missed one tiny, super basic investigative question. Hey, are all of our station platforms the same width? Turns out, nope. The brand new trains were too wide for about 1,300 older platforms. The cost to fix that mistake? A cool 50 million euros. All for one unasked question. Ouch.
Okay, time to switch gears completely. Let's move on to our second domain, speculative questions. If investigative questions are all about what is, speculative questions are all about what could be. This is where we let our imaginations run wild with those 2 magic words, what if.
These are the questions that smash the status quo. They're designed to help you break out of that "this is just how we've always done it" mindset. This is where real innovation comes from, by challenging the rules and exploring totally new ways of looking at a problem. The 2017 America's Cup is such a great example of this. Other sailing teams asked a pretty simple speculative question. What if we used leg power instead of arm power? But they pretty quickly wrote it off. Team New Zealand, though, asked a much better, deeper question. Okay, what else could a pedal system do for us? And that led to a massive breakthrough. It freed up the crew's hands to work the boat's complex controls, giving them a huge advantage that led to a shocking win.
So, let's say your speculative questions have led you to a brilliant new idea. That's awesome, but can you actually do it? This is where our third domain, productive questions, comes in. This is where the dream gets a reality check, and we have to ask, okay, now what?
Productive questions are all about execution. They force you to get real about the practical stuff. Do we have the right people for this? Do we have the money? Do we have the time? It's the critical step that connects a great idea to a successful launch.
Lego learned this lesson the hard way. Back in the early 2000s, they were diversifying like crazy into software, clothes, theme parks, you name it. The ideas were exciting, but they forgot to ask a crucial productive question. Do we actually have the capacity to run all of these different businesses well at the same time? And the answer was a painful no. They stretched themselves so thin that by 2003, the company was actually on the verge of bankruptcy.
Okay, so we have the facts, we have the cool ideas, and we have a plan, but what does it all mean? This is our fourth domain, interpretive questions. It's all about connecting the dots and asking that all-important question, so what?
Think of interpretive questions as being a storyteller. You're taking all these different pieces of information, data points, observations, trends, and weaving them into a story that makes sense. This is how you turn a mountain of data into a single powerful insight. You're constantly asking, what's the real story here?
Here is a classic failure of interpretation. When a big European car maker got their hands on an early Tesla, their engineers saw a 7mm gap in a door panel and literally laughed. Their interpretation was, these guys don't know how to build a car. They completely missed the real world-changing interpretive question, so what if the fit and finish isn't perfect? What does this car's incredible appeal tell us about the future of our entire industry? They saw a tiny flaw and missed a massive revolution.
And finally, that brings us to our fifth domain, which might just be the most important of them all. Subjective questions. This is where we look past the numbers and the plans, and we look at the people. It's about asking what's not being said out loud. Look, you can have the most brilliant strategy on paper, but if you ignore the human element, the emotions, the fears, the hidden agendas, you're just asking for trouble. Subjective questions help you get a read on the room, to uncover those quiet tensions that can absolutely sabotage your project from the inside out.
British Airways learned this in a very public, very painful way. In 1997, they spent £60 million on a huge rebrand, replacing the British flag on their plans with world art. Bold idea, but they never stopped to ask a simple, subjective question. How will our own employees and our loyal customers feel about this? Well, the backlash was immediate and intense. People felt it was a betrayal of their national identity. The whole project had to be scrapped. A costly reminder that feelings matter a lot.
So, there we have it. 5 incredibly powerful types of questions. The final piece of the puzzle, though, is recognizing your own habits. See, most of us have a favorite type of question we lean on, and we tend to ignore the others. Real mastery comes from learning how to find your balance and use all 5. And here are 3 simple ways to do that. First, just practice. If you know you're weak on, say, speculative questions, make it a point to ask one in your next big meeting. Second, adapt your style. The questions that made you a great project manager might not be the right ones for a new director role. And third, and this is a big one, build a team that fills your gaps. You don't have to be perfect at all 5 if you surround yourself with people who think different. So, I'll just leave you with this to think about. Look back at a recent big decision you were part of. Was there some tiny detail that blew up later? A radical idea you never even considered? A hidden tension on the team that derailed everything? I'll bet you can trace the problem back to a question from one of these 5 domains that just never got asked. The good news, the power to start asking it is right there in your hands.